Good morning. It's February 28th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standards Live daily news and commentary show. It comes every day, Monday to Friday, from 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time till about 1 o'clock p.m. Depends on how the show's going and how the guests are going. I got a couple of good guests coming up today. Comments are welcome. Good to see you, Steve and Jamie. And, that's the great thing about being live. I mean, we get live hiccups and technical difficulties that happen, but I think it's worth, dealing with a little bit of that so we can get that direct interaction between the viewers and such. And if you got, questions for the guests, statements, by all means, throw them in. Try to keep things civil, discuss back and forth with each other as well. And same sort of thing. You don't always have to agree with me, and hope plenty of people don't. But we just want to keep it polite and keep the interaction good. I do have Dave Makichuk coming on in a little bit, and he's going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict again, which is still going and going and going. I kind of thought it would have been over by the weekend. Obviously, this is going to be a lot more protracted than that. Then I'm going to talk, something a little different. We got Jake Foster. He's been a sports writer with us, and he specializes in lacrosse, actually. He's been exclusively reporting on the Lacrosse League and Calgary's Roughnecks and things like that, and we can learn a bit about that. It doesn't always have to be all politics and war and dry stuff. We can talk some sports now and then too, and lighten things up. We've got to get a little bit of a life. So, yes, good to see you all there. Danny, all the way from PEI, and Lori and Gary, all sorts of folks coming in to comment. So I'm going to kick off the show in talking, though, about, I've got it in the title, the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. You keep hearing about these things. A lot of our viewers and listeners are already well familiar with it, and pretty much everybody's heard of it, but it gets dismissed. I mean, it sounds bad almost. This is just a crazy conspiracy theory. It's not going anywhere. This is different, guys. This isn't the aliens coming. This isn't the lizard men. This isn't the Loch Ness monster. This is real, and we're hearing more and more about it more often. I'm talking about Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and the Great Reset. And it sounds like a classic conspiracy theory. I mean, a nebulous organization founded in the 1970s with headquarters deep in the mountains of Switzerland. It holds annual meetings in Davos where some of the most powerful people on earth attend on an invitation-only basis. This organization was founded by and still run by a professor named Klaus Schwab. And Schwab makes no bones about wanting to change the entire world, and he's called his plan the Great Reset. The whole premise of the reset is to take advantage of a large world crisis and use it in order to radically change the economic and governance systems around the planet, with an emphasis on moving away from capitalism. I mean, really, it all sounds almost like a buildup for some kind of supervillain in a James Bond movie or something, or as Blair says there, Dr. Evil, in some of the parodies. But it's real. And because of that, many people roll their eyes and dismiss it. I mean, it's almost so cliche that people just can't believe it. And when somebody starts talking about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, they don't believe it. But the intentions of this organization are spelled out totally clearly on their website and stated in their speeches. Like, it's not hidden. We have to be concerned with the motivations of this organization, as the people leading our country are taking part in it. Justin Trudeau has been a speaker at World Economic Forum functions, and he's directly stated while speaking to the UN that he views the pandemic as an opportunity for an economic reset. It was direct parroting of the World Economic Forum statements and goals. We need to be concerned with global leaders who could be motivated to exacerbate challenges and crises in order to pursue change that can't be achieved democratically. Look what we saw recently. The Great Reset calls for a world where a more centralized authoritarian form of governance and much less emphasis on individual freedoms. Many of these world leaders have a condescending world outlook. They're people born to privilege who feel it's their right and duty to take control of the unwashed masses for their own good. We saw that attitude in spades as Justin Trudeau obsessively pursued the implementation of the Emergencies Act. As evidence mounted that such an extraordinary means of control wasn't necessary, Trudeau responded by upping the ante and increasing his inflammatory rhetoric. He even implied a Jewish MP who was questioning his motives must be in league with neo-Nazis. Sort of sounds like Putin making his excuses for going into Ukraine. He just fires outward, doesn't apologize, and he clearly was obsessed and desperate. He wants power. Trudeau may very well have known at the time he was going to have to drop his push to suspend the civil rights of Canadians even before he forced it through Parliament. But he would not back down just on the basis of personal pride. He's proven himself to be a petty, vindictive man who wants to increase his personal power at all costs. He's not a deep thinker or a strategic planner. That's why he parrots talking points of organizations rather than coming up with his own. The world economic systems may indeed be due for a reform. They certainly aren't perfect. None of them are. But to use a crisis in order to concentrate power into a small cabal of leaders and reset the system into what they envision as being a new, fair, and equitable world, that's not where we need to be going here. These people feel they're on the side of right, and they feel the ends justify the means. The developed world, for the most part, is dominated by democracies. It's imperfect and it's messy, but it's by far the best system we've evolved into to date. Freedoms and democracy are always going to be under threat from the authoritarians. The Great Reset and its adherents are only the latest threat. They're also, though, the most pressing and dangerous one we have right now. In this world of craziness and things that are going on, we can't let the Great Reset slide under the radar. It's real and it's right in front of us. Check it out, Google it. I mean, again, it's not strange little obscure websites. It's right there. Don't let people roll their eyes and forget about it when it comes up. The world's in a period of crisis like we haven't seen in generations. We can't let these aspiring despots use this as the means to take our freedoms. Check these guys out. It's time to speak openly about it. As some people have been saying, some of those conspiracies of last year have turned into the facts of today, and the World Economic Forum is one of them. The lizard people, not so much. Okay, that's out of my system for the moment. Let's check in with the news with Dave Naylor, our news editor. How's it going, Dave?
Good, Cory. How was your weekend?
That was pretty good. Kicked back a bit, went to the home show, saw some things that we can't afford to buy, that sort of thing.
So let's talk about the news then. Busy morning, as always, at the Western Standard Newsroom. Our main story right now comes from political columnist Linda Slobodian. She's taking a close look at the UCP nomination battle coming up in the riding of Rimbey Rocky Mountain House Sundre. The current MLA there is Jason Nixon. He's a UCP Environment Minister, UCP Government House Leader, and a very, very close member of Jason Kenney's inner circle. He's under a great fight for the nomination by a local rancher from Eckville called Tim Hoven. Now, there's been all sorts of allegations over the weekend of dirty tricks, and emails have been flying. And take a look at that, Cory. It's a very interesting behind-the-scenes look at what's going on in UCP land out there. We've got another story on electric vehicles. And this will come as a shock to you, Cory, but most Canadians are very worried about the government's mandate that all vehicles be electric by, I think it's 2035. Not so shocking to me. Canada's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Theresa Tam, says wearing masks will become normal for months to come. She obviously hasn't heard that Albertans will be holding a big mask burning party tonight at 11:59, 1 minute before our mask mandates are dropped. But Tam says we're going to have to watch weather forecasts like we would watch putting on our masks and carry them around when necessary. Some more interesting fallout from the Truckers' Freedom Convoy. Our Public Safety Minister, Marco Mendicino, says truckers were a threat of rapists were among the truckers. And he says one of the reasons they brought in the Emergency Act was to protect Ottawa women from these trucker rapists. Of course, no truckers were charged with any sort of violent crime whatsoever, as you know, Cory. The same minister also admitted that he phoned reporters personally and urged them to be very careful when they were dealing with the Trucker Freedom Convoy. So seems like a bit of a conflict there. You've got a column up there from one of your guys, McCall, talking about the military needs of the Ukraine and what exactly Canada is sending them. And for something completely different, I'd urge viewers to go on our site and look at Mike Thomas' piece. It's the most expensive house ever to go on sale in the Tony, San Francisco suburb near Silicon Valley. And it's all yours, Cory, for $141 million. So imagine the kind of chicken coop you could have with a place like that.
Oh, yeah, we could have quite a flock on the go there.
You could have your own wing night every Wednesday.
True. If I could ever actually get up the courage, like I said, I manage these chickens, but I'm too gutless to actually euthanize them. So we're just gonna harvest eggs until they die of old age.
You're not saying you're a big softie, are you, Cory?
And with animals, I'm not so big on people though.
Agreed.
All right. Well, thanks for all that, Dave. Yeah, that is quite a house. I'm going to really have to up my columns and readership before I can start getting ready for a down payment on that one. But one can
Yeah,
always dream.
I'm gonna have to ask Derek for a raise.
Well, I wish you all the best with that.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Dave. I'll see you in a little while. But yeah, lots of stuff coming up in all sorts of directions. I guess, the news scroll is still busy. A lot of it's still, unfortunately, pretty negative. But a lot of stuff is happening. I mean, the convoy protests were dominating everything for a long time. They're winding down. Now we're into the fallout and follow up to see what has happened with those and how it's going to be studied and what impact it had. Now, I'm watching people who opposed it saying it achieved nothing. I don't think that's the case whatsoever, actually. We're seeing restrictions dropping. Government will never admit it, but they were motivated by a lot of the pressure put on by citizens standing up and demonstrating and protesting. So I'm going to stop for a quick ad break before I talk a little more about some of the news that's up that Dave talked about and talk about one of our sponsors, because we are an independent media outlet. And I'm going to be talking a little later about the Calgary Herald and a column they posted. I'll do that after my next guest, because holy cow, at Heather Campbell, if you guys haven't seen it, it is just something else. It's a stinker on a whole new level of bad and provocative and terrible. And I do want to talk about that. But getting back to independent media sources such as the Western Standard, we rely on memberships and sponsors like Bitcoin Well. These guys have been sponsoring us for a while, and they're really good. Talk about volatile times. Currency is volatile. Banks, we don't even know if they're going to seize our money at times. We can't rely on them necessarily. So Bitcoin Well offers you a safe way to purchase Bitcoin. They are the safest way. They're non-custodial. A lot of people have had concerns about digital currencies because they're saying, well, can it be seized and so on? No, you have control of your wallet, which means that Bitcoin comes directly to you. Bitcoin Well never has it. Your bank never has it. It is yours. And these guys will help you through it and explain what a wallet is. How can you set up your wallet? How can you fill it? I mean, there's lots of programs these guys have. They walk you through the steps on what seems to be a bit of a complicated world. Get your money, take control of it. You worked hard for it. Check out bitcoinwell.com and they will help you and explain how your money can remain yours as it should. So, one of the other things, speaking of politics, getting back into that, then I want to hit on that quickly. Talking about Linda Slobodian, put that article up on Jason Nixon's nomination. It just, and I'm a political weenie. I mean, there's no secret about that. I've always been immersed in it, all the way from the 90s when I was in my 20s and later on with the Wild Rose Party and things. But you just eventually get exhausted with the inside play, with the tricks, with the trying to rig things. You set up what you call democratic processes, and then you try to overrule those processes when they don't go your way. And if there's anything, I think, that has really soured a lot of supporters for the Kenney government, it's been actually the political play. I mean, Kenney's been known as one of the more skilled political players, ever around. I mean, he's been in politics, of course, for decades, and he knows the game inside out. But I think it's backfiring. I think people are sick and tired of it. And Jason Nixon has, of course, been very closely connected to Premier Kenney for quite some time. He's the House leader, as we can see in the picture that Nico's got up. They sit together in there. And it's caught up with them. I mean, I don't know how he's been as a constituency representative, but it's not a good sign when you have an up-and-comer on an incumbent MLA that may unseat them, that may take that seat and take away that ability for Nixon to run. And now there's talk that they might find, as Linda Slobodian was talking about, a way to disqualify this up-and-comer, this fellow who's running against them and that challenger. But that's just going to infuriate people all the more. And Linda wrote about that in her article. I mean, this guy running against Nixon has sold, it sounds like, well over 1,000 or 2,000 memberships, to vote against Nixon. Well, those people are going to be furious. And that's just a short drive from Red Deer. And in Red Deer on April 9th, there's going to be a vote on whether or not Jason Kenney stays as the leader of the party. Kenney just keeps getting backed into these no-win situations. So if they shut down this guy's nomination, you will have thousands of enraged constituents converging on Red Deer and voting to kick Jason Kenney out of the leadership of the party. If this guy is allowed to win, though, and manages to knock off a senior cabinet minister from the Kenney government, turn him into a lame duck in this final year of governance in a nomination, Kenney is going to be in another bad situation. He's just looking weaker and weaker. There's just no winning. I just want to say to commenter Tisha Snave, please don't spam the comments section. I understand you mean well, but with a bunch of email addresses and links and everything else, it's distracting and it pulls things away. We're trying to keep the comments to be good and concise and productive, and I welcome them and I appreciate them, but those long ones are not conducive to the good discussions. So please just lay off on those. We got lots to talk about on these things. Thanks. No problem, Tisha. I know, like I said, you mean well. We just, I really want to develop that. This show's been around for, a couple of months now so far, and we got some really good viewers and watchers. We get some really good discourse in there, but it can get a little full. One link to send somebody back to look into areas to talk about after the show and that, and so on. And we got some really heated times going on. It's been very divisive. I'm going to have Dave Makichuk come on. I know some commenters got upset with him last time. They didn't agree with his views on Russia and Ukraine, but some did. And it's a very complicated, convoluted mess over there. You have Eastern Ukraine that does associate very closely with Russia. But you've got the Western aspects that are want to be independent. And I don't know. I mean, just in looking at my point of view, people are trying to make excuses for Russia's incursion. Oh, it was tied in with Soros, or it was tied in with Obama's actions, or there's corruption within Ukraine, or there's a Nazis growing out there. Look, I mean, the Nazi thing gets old, guys. Probably, you got 40 million Ukrainians. Yeah, I bet among them there's probably a couple hundred idiot neo-Nazis. We've got those kind of morons around here too. It doesn't mean they're taking over the country. Remember, that sort of justification is just the sort of garbage that Trudeau used to impose the Emergencies Act upon us. And if there's a concern like that, and if Putin was really that concerned about it, then you bring it up in the world stage, you pressure, you do sanctions, you talk from outside. You don't invade and take over a whole country. That's not how we do it, or how we should do it in the modern civilized world, and that is what's happening right now. Initially people had been saying that it was just going to be, well, he's just going to go into those areas where the secessionists want out, to the eastern Ukraine. No, they're closing in on Kiev now, and this is clearly, it looks like he's heading for the whole enchilada there. He wants to take the works. So what do we do as a world? I don't know. I mean, it's just awful to watch it over there. We just don't want to see more war and death, and it looks like we're in for more of it. The Ukrainians aren't folding. I saw a commenter on Twitter saying that the leader of Ukraine is being irresponsible by pushing back and fighting back. I guess he's saying they should just roll over and quit. Just let them in. That's the way to avoid bloodshed. I mean, there's a little bit to be said for that, I guess. But I mean, that's easy to say when you're not the one who's going to have to live under Putin's rule. At the same time, though, maybe it's not terribly responsible to counsel people to fight. I don't know, but that's where we need to ration and talk and follow and watch this thing closely. We're lucky we're not in any of their shoes to have to make those difficult decisions in a country that's in the middle of a war like that. But there's a lot of short-sighted commentary going on out there, and a lot tied into it. The bottom line is, Ukraine was an independent country. They were not threatening Russia whatsoever. Let's not pretend they were. And they got invaded, hostilely invaded by Russia. There's no justifying it, guys. There isn't. I don't care what actions that Obama might have done in the past or any of that stuff. This is a big turning point. This is something that we can't accept as a civilized world population. Because if you think he's going to stop there, I think you're sadly mistaken. There are a number of other non-NATO states that he would be happy to take hold of. So, I mean, let's learn more about this. This is one of the areas it's going to be. I know even less about lacrosse, so I'm looking forward to learning that from my guest after Dave. But I know limited amounts about what's going on in Eastern Europe. I'm learning more all the time. But we got a lot of people jumping to a lot of conclusions in what's a volatile situation. So the more we can discuss it, hopefully the more we can come to better conclusions on what the hell's going on over there. So with all that babbling out of me, I'm going to bring Dave in to babble for a little while. Makichuk, he's been on a number of times before, and he watches the international scene a lot more closely than I do. So Dave, how are you doing there?
Good. Thank you. Boy, oh boy, it's just been a crazy week. Just wow, it's unprecedented. I mean, I don't know about you, but The last time I experienced something like this, well, the Arab-Israeli War, maybe in 73, but before that, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, and actually with the Syria and the Arab-Israeli war and things like that. In your most recent column, I should point out, you wrote on that and the unpredictability of a conflict. You know, we can always talk and strategize and say what should happen or would happen, but when reality comes in on the ground, often history just doesn't match what all the strategists and experts figure might come about.
No, that's correct. And I quote Gwynne Dyer, who is a terrific military historian and analyst, a Canadian fellow, I should add. If you get a chance to watch his war series on YouTube, it is on there. What he said was the main thing about military strategy is that there is no military strategy. You can learn the rules and you can do everything right and you can still lose. And that appears to be happening to the Russians. And again, the Russian soldiers are probably perhaps not as well trained, not as well motivated, and they are, in a foreign country. They have no one's helping them. They have no place to sleep. Their logistics lines have been overextended. They're in dire straits right now because the Ukrainians are resisting way more than everybody expected. Even I didn't. I thought they would have been in Kiev in 2-3 days. Well, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. And they've slowed them up. They've slowed them up. And that is absolutely amazing that the Ukrainians apparently have a much better military with better leaders and so forth. And the other thing that's coming out that I've heard is that a lot of Russian troops didn't really know why they were being sent in. That they only found out that, hey, we're supposed to kill Ukrainians. I mean, a lot of them are saying, we thought it was a drill. We thought it was an exercise. So they were lied to. They were not told the truth. And also, as far as strategy goes and planning goes, I don't think this was very well planned. I think this is all Putin. And with he currently relieved his top general. He relieved the top general, Gerasimov, I think was his name. And I think this suggests that all those generals under him are afraid to make a decision. They're all afraid, and that this was just a Putin adventure gone wrong.
Yeah, well, I've seen some interesting speculation too, though. I mean, perhaps it reflects a bit of the motivation too. Like, we do know that the Russian military has the ability to just completely, shell the crap out of and obliterate Ukraine from a distance if they wanted to, but they want to, occupy. They want to take Ukraine. They want it to be a side state. They don't want to obliterate it and then have to rebuild it. So, I mean, if you blow out all the infrastructure, if you slaughter too many people, it's not a matter of them being nice, but it's strategically, right. It might be wiser to come in more slowly, even if it's making it more difficult for them right now.
Well, I agree with that. I think what the idea was, or Putin's idea was, to come in, make the Ukrainians surrender, and establish a satellite government, a puppet government, and then leave, and then have Ukraine take over and be a satellite nation and part of Russia or whatever. And I think that was the idea. But the fear, and this goes into Putin's mental health, that we're now going into that area, and there's been a lot of comment on that. And the fear is that because he's spending between 12 and 15 billion pounds a day. That was a report out of the United Kingdom. Because he's spending that much, if it keeps going, this is going to be an issue. And the fear is he will go from the blitzkrieg, which he planned, or this is what they meant to happen, to a blitz. And today we may have seen a bit of that. The Russians used cluster bombs on Kharkiv, which is the second biggest city in Ukraine. They use cluster bombs, and those are terrible. They send out a weapon, and they send out all these little cluster bombs, and many civilians were hurt. This was, I mean, I don't know what the target was, but I saw the video on Twitter, and it seemed to me that it was a civilian target. So, and I'm hearing, we're hearing all kinds of things that they're targeting hospitals. They're doing this, the bad, bad stuff. We don't really know what the hell they're targeting, and until it's all over and done with, we'll find out later. But essentially, I mean, I think that's a war crime to use cluster bombs on a city. But I hope it doesn't come to that. And like you said, what will they have left if they bomb the hell? And we have a Dresden or a Berlin. I mean, you probably in your schooling and the people who are watching saw pictures of Dresden and Berlin and the devastation that bombing can do, and especially today with today's weapons. And the Russians got the weapons. They've got the weapons. They can do this. And I pray to God it doesn't happen. And like you were talking about earlier, the possibility of maybe just, okay, we acquiesce. Please don't destroy everything. Well, yes, there's something to be said about that. But again, I don't know about you, but I would not be wanting to live under their iron thumb. No way.
No, and a lot of older Ukrainians, I mean, I'm certain they're counseling their kids and their grandkids to remind them of what life was like under Soviet rule. And I mean, I know that Putin isn't, it's not the Soviet Union exactly, but it's still, they do not have any interest in being under Russian control again. Millions of Ukrainians were starved. I don't think that's Putin's interest, but you've got some very entrenched people who, they might be happy enough or were happy enough with Russia, but they have no interest whatsoever, again, on having their children come under that kind of rule.
No. And you look at what the Klitschko brothers are saying. One is the mayor of Kiev. Both of them were heavyweight boxers. I'm a big fan of the Klitschkos, by the way. But like they said, look, we're not leaving. Neither did Zelensky. He says, I don't want to ride. I want ammo. And so the EU is providing $500 million in aid. $500 million. The Germans are spending $113 billion on a total 180-degree turn. He has united NATO. He's done the exact opposite of what he wanted to do. It's just a disaster. Sweden and Finland are now thinking of joining NATO. Switzerland, the peace-loving neutral country of Switzerland, said, hey, count us in. We're going to help. The world is changing. As we sit here right now, the world is changing. And I just hope to God that we get through this okay. We don't have John Kennedy. We don't have Bobby Kennedy to help us through a missile crisis or a war crisis. Those guys saved us. They saved us. And don't kid yourself. They did. Without them, I don't know. Today, we got Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken. And I don't have as much confidence in them. And another thing I wanted to say, I'm proud that Canada, okay, I've been bashing Trudeau for a long time, but I am really happy to hear what he and the Canadian government are doing to help Ukraine. I think that's great. I thought it should have happened sooner, but I have to commend him on that. I have to. Yeah,
well, and morale says a lot. I mean, again, I've had the good fortune of never having been in a war. I've been to some war zones actually in my younger years of traveling that, but I wasn't a participant. I can't imagine how terrifying that is. And the difference between whether you retreat or fight. But, a friend of mine who was, he came from Slovakia when it was under communist rule. And what they would do with the mandatory services, they would transfer you to an area. So, of course, you're never putting a gun against Slovakians. You're somewhere else. So he was stationed in East Germany. But he also said, when people would try to get over that wall, they would shoot to miss. I mean, they didn't want to shoot other people escaping.
Wow.
There was not strong morale on the part of the soldiers on the ground. They sympathized with those. And right now, as you were kind of alluding to, a lot of those Russian soldiers, they didn't come out. They didn't sign up for this. They didn't want to go into Ukraine.
No.
So they probably aren't trying their hardest, a lot of them anyways. And when you've got that sort of morale versus Ukrainians who are entrenching and digging in, that makes a big difference in how a war can come out.
Absolutely. And as I said in the piece, or I wrote in the piece, you just things never go as planned. They never do. And it doesn't matter if you know the rules. There are factors, so many factors involved in war. And if you don't supply your troops, I mean, today I saw videos of destroyed Russian weapons and soldiers dead on the ground. Well, that would, America, one thing you got to say about the United States, no man left behind. No man left behind. They will go to the ends of the earth to find an American soldier who has died, and they will make sure he has a proper burial and a proper remembrance. And if he did anything heroic, he or she, okay, will be noted for that. And I think that's just awesome. But in Russia, they don't seem to care. And again, I think this is all Putin. I think this is all him. I think it's got to land on him. And hopefully, I mean, there's a lot of speculation about his mental health, that he's maybe, as one of my friends said, one cookie short of a Happy Meal. He ain't quite there. Head of the CIA, former head of the CIA, and Clapper all said the same thing. The guy may be unhinged, and he's got his finger on the nuclear weapons. And dear God, I mean, mutual assured destruction, right? But that's the scary thing where we're headed. But you know what? Let me say this. Ukraine, everybody's saying, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? What's behind it? What does he want? What does he want? And the best analysis I saw was by an expert who said, Ukraine is the fulcrum. Ukraine is the fulcrum to his plans. And we have to meet hard power with hard power. We have to. We can't let him get away with this. And I know that's terrible to say because it's going to frighten a lot of young people who are worried about their future and about the future of the world and our safety. But we must meet hard power with hard power. There's no other way. Otherwise, if this will just keep going on, he'll just keep going.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wonder if, Russian resistance from within might be what takes him down. Like, that's an interesting factor in this right now. And I got to travel the Soviet Union. I can't claim to be an expert in Russians. One thing I did find when I was over there, though, they are different. They're unique, tough, stoic people, but they're human, and they love their kids as much as anybody else. And again, they remember those conflicts. As you said, they're seeing their soldiers dying over there in Ukraine for a cause they might not feel is worth it. And a lot of them remember how many died wasting time in Afghanistan during the Russian occupation of Afghanistan. They just don't want to go back there. I mean, Russia's doing in many ways better than it had in 30 years. And to turn back that clock, a lot of Russians, I've heard thousands of them were arrested in protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg. So this has to be putting pressure on Putin from within, even if he's not responding to it yet.
Yes, that's a good point. I think with the ruble collapsing and, well, not collapsing, but dropping in value, and the economic sanctions, which, wow, I mean, look at everybody just hitting him, even Canada, the EU hitting them with the SWIFT thing. I don't know how, I mean, I'm not into economics, so I don't know how hard that will affect them. But a friend from Belgium told me it's going to really hurt them. So, I mean, I don't know where it's going or if they have a ceasefire, if he wins the ceasefire. By the way, the discussions on the border, I think, is a total ruse. I think it's a complete ruse. I don't think Putin means he can't be trusted. He's a liar. We can't trust him. I don't know what reason he had for that, to make himself look like a peacemaker or some bloody thing. Or maybe he doesn't want to spend any more money on this needless war. I don't know. But exactly, I think, the Russian people are they're just like us, and they're very similar. I mean, they're not much different. I have Russian friends, and so does my daughter, and every one of them, every single one of them does not like what's happening. None of them are for it. None of them. They don't see us as enemies, and we don't see them as enemies. They're like everybody else in the world. I'm sure if you've traveled, I've traveled, you know what it's like. Everybody wants a big screen TV. Everyone wants good food. good drink, and to have their kids grow up and have a future. That's all we want. And for Putin to go in this wild direction is just it does, it was a mistake. And now he's overstretched himself. Now I think he's overstretched himself. And like I say, I hope. I don't know where it's heading, but it's not good. This whole thing is not good.
So as Cheryl Dawn, a commenter, pointed out, Ukraine signed on to join the EU. I mean, it's not part of NATO, but does that impact things? I mean, that puts the neighboring nations under the EU under some obligations and treaties and things like that. Like that's part of a mistake, perhaps, as well. I mean, just because Ukraine wasn't part of NATO doesn't mean other nations aren't going to stand up for them.
Yes, and I again, it's quite admirable. I mean, I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked at the support, and I think, Putin's two mistakes. One, underestimating Ukrainian resistance. Holy man, I thought they would. Like I say, I didn't think it would last that long. They are just incredible. The second thing is that he did not expect the world to make him a pariah and to join. I mean, even non-NATO countries are joining in this, and they are being just reviled around the world for this action, which is irrational. It's irrational. It's unhinged. There was no need for it. And to those who say, well, NATO was on the doorstep. Yes, but that can be figured out. And also the situation in Donbass and Luhansk could have been handled better by Zelensky in Ukraine. Should have been handled better. I think those people deserve some autonomy. It's all, you know what I mean? They should have gotten some sort of benefit from being, it's not worth going, like you said earlier, it's not worth going to war over. It's not worth destroying cities and killing innocent people. It just makes no sense today. It's 2022, for God's sake. Have we not learned a thing? Have we not learned a thing?
In some ways, it's not looking good, but we are seeing things differently. As you said, we wouldn't have thought that, that Europe and the rest of the world would rally quite like this. We certainly didn't think Ukraine would last this long, and to settle in for a long game. A lot of even though it won't be war, direct intervention, a lot of sanctions could really start putting a lot of pressure on Putin in the long run here. As you said, it's a very expensive exercise.
Yes. Doing
this isn't necessarily easy. Aside from the human cost, there's a dollar and cents cost that he's got to incur, and maybe he might lose out of this in the long run. I mean, we just hope, I guess, it comes to a resolution somehow with the least amount of bloodshed possible.
I hope so too. And just to go back a little bit here quickly about history, it's always good to revisit history and look what happened in the past. And during the Arab-Israeli War, Syria and Egypt against Israel in 1973, they were looking at a situation, and Israel had no help from NATO. They weren't a NATO member. They had to go it alone. But they had a guy named Henry Kissinger, and that guy, knew what to do. First of all, he made sure that Israelis had arms shipments and made sure they had everything they needed. And then he seized the moment. And he booted out the Russians, said, out here, you guys, you're not involved in this. We're going to deal with the Egyptians and everybody else. But also, he made sure in shipping those arms that not to give them too much, because they didn't want to embarrass the Egyptians as well. So it was a very, very touchy game, which he balanced extremely well. And then also he put America on DEFCON 3 to scare the Russians. So now, not that I'm saying that we should do that now, but I thought, and he handled it very well, and he resolved that situation. He was able to resolve that situation very well. I don't have as much confidence in Antony Blinken. I think he's a smart man. I think he's a good guy. But Joe Biden, Antony Blinken, oh man, like I say, I wish we had a wartime president, but we don't. So we're just going to have to make the best of it.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching with concern and just seeing what happens and hoping for the best. So thanks for checking in there, Dave. And you write, of course, a regular column with the Western Standard, and you share your thoughts and give us updates, which is appreciated. And we will talk to you again, I'm sure, soon down the road.
Okay, thanks, Cory. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So yeah, that was Dave Makichuk. He writes again and he has for quite some time on international issues. And this is a complicated one. My part of what I was going on about earlier is just a few too many people are jumping to conclusions too quickly. We've just, there's so many nuances. As Dave also said, I mean, there is some problems going on the eastern side of the Ukraine where perhaps some independence should have been warranted and the Ukrainian president cracked down. But I mean, I'm an independent supporter in Western Canada. It doesn't mean that the United States would be justified to come into Alberta and take us over to help liberate us from the nation. It doesn't work that way, or it shouldn't. So we'll be watching that unfold. I'm going to speak quickly to our next sponsor before I rip into the Calgary Herald for some of their reporting on things. And that's the Canada Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of individual rights and standing up for ourselves and keeping our ability to never be taken over by nations. No, of course, we couldn't hold off a military. Most of the people who own firearms are people who enjoy them, again, safely, legally, and we know whatever reason they want to is their business if they're not bothering anybody else, whether they're hunting or collecting or target shooting, whatever. But of course, we got a government that's always trying to take that right away in Canada. The Liberals do not want you to have your firearms. The Canada Shooting Sports Association is standing up for you. They have a number of lawsuits out on behalf of firearms owners against the government of Canada to push back, because I mean, it just seems every 6 months they categorize a whole bunch more firearms that are apparently now no longer usable, and they will seize them from you. Sure, they'll buy them, but that's not the point. When your property's taken from you by force, it doesn't matter if you're compensated later. The force is the problem. So be sure to check these guys out. The Canada Shooting Sports Association, they are the ones who are standing up for your ability to keep, maintain, and use firearms. They need your help. Take out a membership with them. They got a lot of other resources too, things from everything from firearms trade shows to videos on safe, responsible firearm use. Okay, so before we get on to talking about some lacrosse and things, those who read the Herald, maybe some of you went over there when I put the teaser out. If not, you really should. It's one of those things you read and you'll be enraged by, but it's worth reading because holy cow, this column by Heather Campbell on the Convoy protests was just beyond the pale. It was something else. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of it, okay? This is where it started, and it gets worse. The recent blockades in Canada were not about COVID-19. They were about white supremacy and extremism. The blockaders are not patriots, nor are they oppressed. The blockaders are an irrational mob of thugs upset about injury to their individual entitlement and panicked about the erosion of their white privilege. That's paragraph 1, folks. And as I said, it only gets worse from there. I won't turn your stomachs by reading the rest of it, but you probably should have a look at that. Like, wow, why? What is this obsession with trying to tie a non-racial issue into racism all the time? I'm sick and tired of it. It's called race baiting. It's divisive. It's bad for all of us. It's bad for society. And it's not saying that racism doesn't exist to say that these protests aren't racially based. It's just because it's just saying the truth of it. You don't have to agree with the protests. You can say the people at the protests are conspiracy theorists or crazy or they're putting people's health at risk. You can claim those things by all means. But there's no evidence at all that these were racially motivated. Yet the Herald runs this garbage column, and it was garbage, smearing the whole thing and those people out there. I've gone to these in person. I've been critical of them before, especially when they were smaller. I thought there were some pretty out there people who were managing these protests in the early parts of it. And I was critical of it, but I didn't see any evidence of it being a racial thing. Why have they got to throw that in there? I mean, a number of the people at those aren't white. So these are really terrible white supremacists, these guys. I mean, I don't know how the white supremacist membership book works, but I'm pretty sure if you're not white, you probably can't be a member of their club. Yet somehow they're participating in these protests. You say, oh, but most of the people at the protest were white. Well, yes. I mean, go to a hockey game in Calgary at the Saddle Dome. Most of the people in the audience are white as well. It's demographics. It's not racism. To have that put in there. And, so I'm the opinion editor here at the Western Standard. It's opinion. I mean, people pointed out, hey, they put it at the bottom of it. They said, this is the opinion of the writer, not reflecting of the Calgary Herald. Fair enough. That's what Heather Campbell wrote. It certainly doesn't reflect the entire editorial board of the Herald at all. But we have a degree of standards. When we get some stuff sent to us that I don't run, I choose not to. It's not that I want my slant on things. I've posted and edited columns that I didn't agree with whatsoever, but they were the other person's reason, point of view, so we could put it up there. But if somebody sent us something as inflammatory as this thing was, as purely unsourced, lacking in fact, and actually destructively intended, we take it very seriously. If we're ever going to spike a column, I would have to go to Derek's office and we would talk about it. I suspect we would never publish anything like that. We just wouldn't. So what was the Herald thinking, putting that piece of trash in their publication? Why did they run that? That's when you say to Heather, geez, take a day and think about this. And if you really want to write on this, cut this out into something a little more rational and come back to us, because this is just garbage. But they didn't. They ran it, and there it goes. And to a degree, then, that does land on the Herald. As I said, we don't want them censoring. I mean, hey, opinion writing is pretty boring if there isn't an opinion on it, but you've got to have a degree of standards. And this was an irresponsible, in my view, hateful piece. It smeared people who were going out who just had concerns about medical freedoms, individual freedoms, and this is the crap they got from it. Furthermore, the Herald on the weekend, they did actually go out and cover some of the thousands of people who have been coming out every weekend in Calgary and demonstrating against restrictions. But what did they report on? Well, there were 35 counter-protesters. 35 out of thousands who come out every week that the Herald didn't even bother to report on in the other weeks. They write a big write-up on the 35 people who came out to complain about the protests. One of the things I found kind of funny when I read the story about it was they talked to one of the counter-protesters and asked, were you afraid when you saw them all approaching? And the counter-protester said, no, not at all. Well, of course not, because it's a peaceful protest. They weren't going to hurt you. At worst, you got people glaring at you. Somebody apparently threw a smoke bomb somewhere, but nobody knows who actually threw it or why. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But this is what the Herald does. Why don't you report both sides? Why didn't we see a story every week saying, hey, look at this, a few thousand people showed up? And we've had that going on in City Council. They're discussing that right now, actually, in Calgary today. There's a motion to get City Council to address these weekly protests going on down at the park. Well, okay, but what do you want to do about it? What do you expect to do about this? Are you looking to crack down? This isn't an encampment. This isn't truckers parked down there. They aren't, this isn't anything. There's no border being blocked. This is a weekly protest of thousands of people going out and then doing a march. It takes a couple hours a week. Annoying, I guess, if you live right in that neighborhood. Fair enough. But should City Council intervene? I think their vote to go forward on a report and look into this was something like 13 to 2 or 12 to 3 or something on City Council, saying they want to follow up. So we're going to have civic governments cracking down on peaceful protesters now? I mean, when they're fed by garbage like what the Calgary Herald just reported, though, who knows what's going to come out. So yes, I see Nico's got my Twitter account up there at Cory B. Morgan. If you want to get into more of that discourse and scrapping, after the show or before the show, or got tips from me, things like that. Twitter is where I spend a lot of time. I see the guest in the lobby here. We're going to get to him pretty quickly here. I want to remind everybody, since I'm shooting at, legacy media, shooting at mainstream media, which is a bit self-serving, of course, because we're alternative media. And it's not just self-serving, it's principled. You want to get good, unfiltered coverage of things. Dave Naylor out there, our news editor, makes sure we are constantly putting out good content. We've actually got a sports writer covering lacrosse. I'm looking forward to learning about that on there. A lot of political things and a lot of opinion. Of course, you don't always agree with all of it, but that's the point of it. It makes you think. Go to the westernstandardonline.com and take out a membership if you haven't already. And use the coupon code TRIGGERED. Put it in there. You'll save yourself $10. And you get a free trial for 2 weeks. So, hey, there's nothing to lose here. Check it out. 2-week trial. 95% of people who try it out realize for $10 a month, it's well worth it for them. $99 a year. Even less than that if you use that triggered code when you sign up for a membership. And that's how you support us, and we can keep producing. We got another person in the newsroom. I think her name's Amanda, but I'm not sure yet. We're hiring. We're expanding because you guys have been great with us, and we can keep producing content. It's expanding. And then we don't have to rely on that sort of trash like I was talking about in the Calgary Herald, which used to be a really good publication and still has some good journalists involved with them. And if they're any good in the long run, we'll probably end up scooping them up as we grow in the long run. Who knows? But thank you for taking up memberships, guys, and keep them coming. And don't forget that Triggered is your coupon code. Okay, let's bring Jake Foster in. He's been writing columns on lacrosse in the budding and small sports department of the Western Standard. Hey there, Jake. How's it going?
It's going well, Cory. How are you?
Very good, thanks. I was talking to Dave, and I've been looking at your stuff, and I've heard about it, and I said, geez, I've really got to study up on lacrosse before I talk to you, because I don't, to be honest, know a heck of a lot about it. And then he says, well, why do you want to do that? Just ask Jake. That's the point. And you know what? Geez, Dave, you're right. So,
Yeah.
and it made me look forward to this. I hear about it. It's Canada's national sport, but I don't know enough about it, and it's really been growing.
No, it really is. And, you're not in the minority in not knowing about lacrosse. There's so many people that are unaware of it, and it's got such a huge following actually in Alberta, and it continues to grow. And, I've been presented with this cool opportunity where I get to write about something that I'm passionate about. It's a league that I played in. It's a league that I loved playing in. I have many connections there and stuff. And, the opportunity just kind of came up where it was like, we have this market here that's not really being tapped into. What can we make of it there? So I guess I was kind of fortunate to be in the right place, right time. And, I got my broadcast news diploma from SAIT, and there was just kind of an opportunity where James Finkbeiner was talking to me and was like, this needs to happen here. And so we were able to work something out. But yeah, I've got a couple pieces up so far. Obviously, the lacrosse season hasn't rolled around yet in Alberta, so things are a little slow. It's definitely going to pick up a little bit more as we enter the summer, and there's a little bit more to talk about as the season starts. We're going to have a little bit more opinion pieces, coverage on individuals and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm very excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, and James Finkbeiner, he's our operations manager, and he's been very involved in lacrosse. I think he coaches a bit on the side, if I recall.
Yeah, he actually he owns one of the. I don't know. He doesn't coach. He owns one of the junior B Tier 1 teams in Calgary. The Calgary Chill, which I was actually was a member of for 2 years, which is where me and James began our relationship there. And then now 7 years later, he kind of got me into this as well. So it's cool, the connections that you make in the community of the sport.
So the Roughnecks, which is Calgary's big team there, and that's part of an international league. So that's a league. What's their season run at? Like I noticed it was saying stats of upwards of 10,000 people come out to those games, and it's great. They're having a really good time. So what's the basis of that league? The kind of season and the amount of games they run?
Yeah, so the NLL is the Professional Indoor Box Lacrosse League, and it starts in December. This year's been a kind of bit of a tricky year with COVID cancellations and stuff, and a lot of games postponed. And then it typically runs for about 4 months into the beginning of April. And then the playoffs are usually like finishing up around April. I'm expecting that we're going to see that maybe get pushed back into June, May, even June, depending on how they do with the postponed games. They're trying to make it work with a lot of back-to-back games on weekends and stuff like that. But it's about a 4.5, 5 month season there, and it's cool. It's only on weekends, so one part about lacrosse that's unfortunate is that people don't have it doesn't have the following yet to pay the athletes full time, so that they can just pursue lacrosse as a career. So everybody playing in the NLL has second jobs that they work during the week and stuff, and then they'll fly out on the weekend. So it's a very cool job, and it's a very cool league in the fact that Saturday after a game, both teams will be there for the night, and then they'll hang out and go for drinks after. And it's such a small, tight-knit community that so many guys on the teams know each other and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a really cool league, and it's expanding, it's growing. And Calgary's got one of the bigger markets in the NLL where they get a good following out, they get a good fan base out, close to 10,000-12,000 people out every game, which is awesome to see. And then it's just growing. They're adding new expansion teams constantly, and it's such a viewer friendly game, especially if you're able to go to the arena and go see it live in person. They play music the whole time. They got beer deals on it. Their motto is come for the party, stay for the game. And so they do a great job of marketing it and bringing out college students and people there that are just wanting something to do where it's fast paced, it's entertaining, it's rough. There's a lot of goals, there's a lot to cheer for, and it's very engaging as well. So I think NLL is doing a great job right now.
Yeah, well, you don't have to have NFL type salaries to have a good sport going on. I remember a long time ago when I was in my 20s and I was working out in the field, in the oil field, there was a seismic crew, and they actually had in wintertime, there was a CFL player who worked seismic in winters because, they only paid so much. You play football for the season, and then you go out to the oil field to pay your bills in the winter because, they just didn't have that kind of salary, but they still put on a heck of a product. I mean, people love going to their football games and have a very loyal fan base. So, this lacrosse ability to have, I guess, a professional, but still, I guess part-time in a sense is a manageable model.
Absolutely, and you touched on it there. It's a lot of the guys, you're not playing it to make money. You're doing it because you love the game, and a lot of the guys are trying to grow the game. And so I'm just happy to be able to do my little part in that. Just being able to write about it a little bit, bring some attention there, just kind of drawing more eyes to it. Maybe somebody read something that they never read before and be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I might want to check out a lacrosse game, or I might want to put my kid into a lacrosse game like that. So yeah, you don't get into lacrosse for to make millions of dollars, that's for sure. But you do it because you love the game, and it's such a beautiful game, and there's so much depth to it. And once people start to really get into it and understand it, it's hard not to fall in love with it.
I see a commenter, Ken Finlayson, is saying lacrosse is growing the USA as well. He says his grandson, Houston, is in his second year of athletic scholarship at Weber University in Florida with it. Getting into the entry level of lacrosse, kids, students, people are interested. I mean, are schools starting to run lacrosse teams, or is this mostly extracurricular sort of things that they get involved with? Like, how does one get into lacrosse in Canada?
Well, so that's interesting. And Weber, I've heard of it. I know it's a great school. So it's interesting because in Canada we play box lacrosse. It's primarily indoor lacrosse. There is a couple field lacrosse programs that operate during the fall and sometimes the winter. And the field lacrosse is what they play in the United States. So you'll see a lot of Canadian kids play that field lacrosse and then go down to the U.S. for an NCAA scholarship. I know I did it. I've had a bunch of friends do it. And it gives you an opportunity to continue your education and, save mom and dad a couple bucks if you can get a good scholarship there as well. And then you get to go play lacrosse. And then when you're done, typically Canadian players, we don't love the field game as much. It's a little structured, but some guys do. But for the most part, you'll see guys come back and then they'll continue to play box lacrosse in the summers, and then they'll leave in the beginning of the school year, head down to the States and go play some lacrosse there, all outdoor during the year, and then they'll come back and do it all over again. It's a really, really cool circle if you get into it at a young enough age where you can kind of grow that development, understand both aspects of the game, because it's unique in the sense that there's indoor lacrosse and outdoor lacrosse, and they're very different games, but they're played the same way with the same stick, same motions and stuff like that. So if you get into it at a young enough age and you can kind of understand how it operates, then there's definitely a lot of opportunity to go places with it, and having the ability to go pursue a college career is something that I think if you can do it as a child, I highly recommend do it. I did it, and it was one of the highlights of my life so far. It's an absolute blast to be able to go somewhere new, play lacrosse, have 45 best friends on the team automatically. It's well worth it.
Yeah, so it's a physical, fast-paced game, that one, too. I mean, I've seen little bits of it. As I said, I don't know a lot about it, but actually the times I catch it, like, wow, these guys are really going at it out there, and it's a kind of a high-scoring game. Is the breakdown of the game, though, similar to hockey, like in a number of periods, or the length of time that a game is played, or?
I'd actually probably compare it more to basketball. It's broken down into 4 quarters, and it's played on the hockey rink with turf put down, and the nets are 4 feet by 4 feet, and instead of ice, you got turf. But as far as systems go, and as far as understanding the game of box lacrosse, they
gave up the one breakaway.
It's
2 breakaways, 1 goal before they got on it.
Sorry, Cory.
Anderson.
Oh, I still got you
it's
there.
definitely,
it's definitely
leading
him as Danby
it's
was
definitely
right with him. But Danby
more similar to basketball
on,
with pick and rolls, the way the system operates there and stuff.
Shot
so it's
McGraw,
very
nice
you got some highlights up here now. Yeah, it's very cool.
No goal, 'cause I think,
as far as
landed
system
it in the
structure,
crease.
it's more similar to basketball, but there is that physicality of hockey and football, and you get the slash, you get a little bit more there as well. So it's a combination of the two for sure.
I was impressed.
Great, yeah. Well, it's just
kind of
looks like a fun, good sport. Now, something that's really developed and gotten very large over the last few years is women's hockey. Is there much of a women's presence in lacrosse starting to build up?
There really is, and it's something that's not really noticed as lot. But there's definitely the women's lacrosse is growing, and especially in the States, the opportunity for women especially to get scholarships is so prevalent out there, and a lot of the women that play in Alberta and Canada get accustomed to that box lacrosse style, and that makes them such a better field lacrosse player as well. So when they go to the colleges, they're able to get those full ride D1 athletic scholarships to go to Towson, go to an Ivy League school even. So yeah, we're definitely starting to see a lot more women involvement in lacrosse in Alberta and across Canada there. It's really cool.
Great, yeah, and it is, as some others are pointing out, Ashley's been saying, and Pamela, it's a sport that's been around for actually hundreds of years, and it's just a great kid sport for developing skills socially, physically, all of it, like any sport. it's good to see more options. I mean, you can't all be hockey players, but there's some great stuff going on there. So, I'll just be. But sorry, we just had a bit of a technical issue there for a moment.
No problem.
Yeah, but it's so the season gets going. I imagine the ticket prices is sort of like with CFL and things such as that. It's probably more affordable to take a family out for a day and then catch one of the games and get there in person. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely. The Roughnecks are really good with formulating ticket packages to make it affordable. They have discounts for student night for college students. If you show proof of ID there, you'll get, I think your tickets are $10 or $15, but even so, I think you won't be paying more than $20 for a ticket to go to the game. And then, they got that beer prices on as well. And it's $20, like you can go see a movie for the same price. And I think this is a lot more fun. You get to sit with your friends, have a good time, hang out. But then in the junior ages, the tickets are $5 to get into a game, which is really important because, a lot of these teams, they don't make a whole bunch of money, and that $5-10 for ticket sales for a junior B team coming in can go a long way with helping them pay for road trips and stuff around, so that the kids can continue to play, and then they can also keep the fees down in order to continue to grow that game and have that involvement and make it a game that everybody can play. And that's one thing that's really good about lacrosse is that the community is really good at making sure it's affordable and it's able to have kids that want to play be able to play.
Great. Well, and so I appreciate you coming in. Where else can we? I mean, you're writing for the Standard, and you're going to be tracking the Roughnecks games and reporting on them, and lacrosse in general in coming days. Is there anywhere else where you report or write on these issues?
Yeah, so I'm actually working my way. I'm still trying to get into the NLL. I'm working my way up there right now. I was drafted this year and then released in training camp due to some unfortunate circumstances, but I'm out playing in the Arena Lacrosse League, which is a new league this year. It basically is acting as like the AHL to the NHL, where it's a feeder league where kids that or people that are trying to make it into the NLL can go play and stuff like that. So I'm doing that out there. I do the color commentary for all the games that I'm not playing in. I've been asked to, help a little with the media and stuff like that. So I've been involved with the media with the ALL as well. And then, mostly just kind of focusing on the Western Standard, focusing on lacrosse in Alberta. It's been a little bit slow. I'm trying to do an article a week, but as the season picks up, it's definitely going to be a lot more than that. And we're going to be kind of looking at every day, kind of recaps of what's going on. We're going to do a lot of previews of the season and stuff going on. So yeah, definitely if you're looking to keep up with lacrosse in Alberta, then this is the place to find it. Like I mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of coverage for lacrosse in Alberta, and it is such a beautiful sport and a beautiful game with such great people involved in the community that it's really awesome to get involved in.
Great. Well, thanks for coming in and sharing that with us today. I'm looking forward to your ongoing coverage. Maybe we'll have some playoff stuff to talk about down the road soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This has been awesome. I'm happy anytime somebody's willing to give a platform for me to talk about lacrosse. It's a great day. It's a great sport, and I'm just happy to be able to share it with some people.
Yeah, I can tell you enjoy it. No, thanks again. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cory.
Great. So that was the Western Standard's Jake Foster. As you can see, a passionate player and reporter on lacrosse in general. And it's piqued my curiosity. I mean, if you want to get out with the family, you want to take in a sport, those that I've talked to have always really enjoyed getting out to Roughnecks games. And as you said, there's other leagues as well. Or if you're looking to get your kids into something, there's other alternatives. Look into that. I mean, it's a distinctly North American sport and a very old one. And Jake will help cover our local team and see how that goes, broaden those things. Because those are things that bring about interest as well. I mean, a professional league is tough to keep going, but if you get that fan base going, it inspires kids, it gives them something to move towards and play towards, and then more get involved and it follows up. That was way back in the ancient old days in the 80s. I was a ski jumper. I grew up in Banff, and I made it up to like provincial team level and competed in the national championships, but I wasn't Olympic quality or anything like that. That sport's a really great sport. I really enjoyed it. Lots of kids did. And actually, speaking of women who have really taken off within the sport, the women's ski jumpers in Canada are actually quite fantastic. A small team, but they do a really good job. But it's hard to maintain and keep the interest and keep the kids coming on something like that because you don't have constant ski jumping coverage on TV or a ski jumping league or things like that. Some of the nations like Finland and Norway and that, where it's a much bigger thing, they had a better means of getting kids interested and on board. But it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, and if you get more people involved in a good sport, it'll build up. And professional leagues, of course, are a great way to do that. And the Lacrosse League and the Roughnecks and some of those other venues are a good way to bring that interest in. And again, just to go out and have some fun. We're opening up. I want to talk a little bit about that. We're finally in Alberta, again, hopefully permanently. The masks are coming off. As Dave said, midnight tonight, we're done with the bloody things. Pretty much all restrictions are gone. There's going to be a couple others hanging there. People are going to be annoyed. I won't be fully happy until every restriction is gone, federally, provincially, but still, we're making a very good leap forward. And that means also we can go out and start enjoying ourselves, and it's enjoying ourselves as a group. That's part of what's the whole sickness of the restrictions on what's been terrible over these last couple of years. We are social animals. It's important for us to get together. That's why we do these things. That's why arena sports have always been huge. Or even getting back as terribly as the original arenas in Rome and so on. Yeah, it wasn't just to be able to watch gladiators slaughter each other and torture animals, but you were sitting with your friends and neighbors and eating a spleen on a stick or something while you watched the event. It was part of gathering. It's what we do. We bond as a species with each other, and it's coming back. They shut down the hockey games for a whole year. The NFL, they had those stupid cutouts in the background on those football games. And I'm sure as he was saying, the guest was saying there quickly, COVID put a lot of pressure on their league too. Now we can get out and have some fun, and it's affordable. A lot of us had a hard, bloody time this last couple of years too, due to restrictions and our businesses being crushed and things like that. So maybe you can't afford a Flames game and stuff like that. But you know what? You can get out with the kids or the spouse or just by yourself or whatever and take in a lacrosse game. What the hell? Cheer for your local team. Have a couple of beers. Overpriced watery beers probably. It's the Saddle Dome. That's the way it works, but they make their money. Get out there and do that. And I know somebody else was saying, people are starving and we got sanctions and this and that, and you're talking about lacrosse. Yes, I am. We don't always be on nothing but politics. Don't worry. I've got plenty of that in me, and we will always cover lots of it. But let's break it up a little. We need to enjoy life a little bit now and then. And sports are a good way to do it. A good way to distract ourselves from all the government crap that's going on, from all the trash. Ashley saying some kids don't want to take their mask off. They know nothing different. Yeah, I know. It's terrible. We've programmed them. We've embedded fear into them. It's terrible, and it's going to take time to get out of that. I think a good way to get out of that, again, get into an arena with a whole pile of people and enjoy each other for a while. Get over that stupid fear of each other. Get those kids out on the ground in a field somewhere playing lacrosse or soccer or whatever. And again, interacting with each other without masks and without some union teacher telling them how unsafe the world is, and get them somewhere back closer to normal where they should be. Before I talk a little more about some more news, and I'll get back into some political things, of course, again, I should talk about our sponsor one more time, and that's Bitcoin Well. These guys, they've been good with us. They're fantastic, and these are in unstable times in the world right now. We've got a plan at the Standard. Those of us, it's optional. You can opt in. Bitcoin Well facilitates this. So employees can have their own Bitcoin wallet set up, and they can choose to have a percentage of their salary actually paid in Bitcoin, and the Standard, in our case, generously matches it to a certain point. So you can actually just passively keep saving a little bit of money off to the side in your own little Bitcoin wallet over there. It's up to you how much or how little you want to put in. And Bitcoin Well facilitates those sorts of corporate plans, so companies can do that sort of thing. A savings plan for the employees, something else that's off to the side. And again, it's always in your hands. It's your money. It's your wallet. And they help educate you because it sounds complicated sometimes. They have what they call Bitcoin University or Bitcoin Academy, they call it. They partnered with Athabasca University. And there's online courses you can sign up for. And there it is. Nico pulled it up. And they'll teach you and walk you through what it's all about. So you can feel safe about perhaps putting your money into Bitcoin and investing in it. And they have live one-on-one consultations. That's with a real person face-to-face. It's a Western Canadian company. Not some distant call center or anything like that. They won't send you a PDF file to read that's 500 pages long. If you got a question, you can get one-on-one consultations with real people to find out how to get involved in Bitcoin and how to manage that. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. They are a great sponsor. And let's get back to some more negative stuff. Dave mentioned that earlier. The Freedom Convoy truckers are still getting demonized. This crap's still going on. Not just the Calgary Herald, of course, though they were awful with that column they ran. But here we go with our Public Safety Minister, Marco Mendicino, testifying at a Commons Public Safety Committee. He said threats of rape by political protesters were justified the use of the Emergencies Act. They're making up all their excuses in hindsight as to why they imposed martial law in Canada. And it is martial law. I had somebody beacon at me on Twitter about that today again. No, look it up. When you suspend civic rights, to address an emergency, even temporarily, it's a form of martial law. And yes, you are suspending rights when you can have banks seize people's property and money. You are under martial law when you can force people as labor, tow truck drivers and other such things. It's martial law. It's not an exaggeration. What was an exaggeration was the threats of rape. So he's saying, this is his quote, he said, there were Ottawans who were subjected to intimidation, harassment, threats of rape. Nobody was charged with sexual assault. There's no witnesses to any of this, of course. Sounds almost like he's talking out of his ass. A Conservative member of Parliament, Larry Brock, he's a former Crown prosecutor. He challenged it. Said Cabinet never mentioned the sexual assault over 3 whole days of debate on the Emergencies Act. So why didn't we hear about this? As you see, as you can see with Nico pulling it up there, the most disturbing aspect of what I hear about this rape allegation, a very heinous crime. We debated this particular issue for over 40 hours, and not once did the Prime Minister, and this is quotes from him, he said, did you or any other senior member of the Cabinet or any member of your backbench raise a rape allegation? I mean, if this was happening, if the streets were crawling with roving rapists, you'd think that would be top of mind as you're bringing in the Emergencies Act, wouldn't it? I mean, that's pretty disturbing. But it's hindsight where you're bringing up this apparent rape gangs, apparent threats of rape. These just perverts walking around exposed, chasing people down. I don't know. Nobody saw it. Tens of thousands of cameras done. There's so many of these things that we never saw. But they come up in Parliament. History, and I've said it before, and it's not just my bias, though sure, I've got plenty of it, is not going to look kindly on Trudeau for this idiocy, for bringing in the Emergencies Act. He didn't need to. And that's what these guys are realizing. That's why they're bringing up this crap. They're trying to cover their butts. I mean, it didn't even last 48 hours when he brought it in. He should have dropped it before that. But again, I think he was making his point of pride, or his point of pushing, and his point of wanting power. That's what it's always about. And that's when, when I started this out, talking about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. Trudeau wants power. He desperately wants power. And the Convoy gave him that excuse. He got away with imposing the Emergencies Act and never even actually putting it all the way through the processes. It never got through Senate. Maybe it never would have. But he got what he needed. He managed to ruin people's lives. They managed to seize people's bank accounts. They managed to keep people locked up without bail. As far as I know, they're still locked up. They're political prisoners at this point. They're not presenting any risk to anybody. We let murderers out on bail. We don't let a couple of Convoy. They're going to go out and honk horns at people again? Oh, the horror. But this is where we're at. And now they're making their excuses for what they tried to do. Other news, the blacklist at a federal bank, Farm Credit Canada, has been blacklisting customers suspected of sympathizing with the Freedom Convoy. Suspected. We think you were sympathetic. We're going to blacklist you. And, we'll hold your accounts, or we won't loan you money. We'll shut down your business. I mean, this is the Farm Credit of Canada. There's obviously a lot of farmers are pretty reliant on being able to have their money go back and forth in this. A senator from Newfoundland said freezing bank accounts is an invisible punitive process. And she was a former provincial auditor who told Senate, even the legislators couldn't get answers on how banks applied the order. Like, what a mess we've got. They basically just kind of threw it out there. Said, here, you've got the authority to steal people's money. You got the authority to seize their accounts on suspicion. I mean, on what? Leaks, hacks, things like that? That's what you kind of based it on, wasn't it? Well, they're following up on this, and it's not looking good, guys. It's not looking good at all. But they make an excuse. So now, apparently, we got crazed roving rapists. Right. And then Tam, Oh, yes, Dr. Theresa Tam. Dave talked about that in the news update. So as much as we're looking forward to burning our masks at midnight here tonight in Alberta, she's making sure to warn us. Keep that mask handy. Don't burn it. Think of wearing it as a habit, like checking the weather. No, I'm not wearing that stupid thing. I'm sick to death of it. But she's warning us. She's saying we might bring them back. We might mask everybody up again. We might cover your faces. I don't like this. They're feathering things. They're getting ready. And it's foreplay for bringing in more restrictions. She says, in the months ahead and adjusting to a new way of managing and responding to COVID-19, you might think of checking your local COVID virus activity like checking the weather. You would want to check the weather before putting on a coat, so check the weather and bring your mask with you. No! Stop it. This is over. Learning to live with it. Don't tell me to bring a mask with me. That's when you start getting that talk of the new normal. That's something that I can't stomach. The new normal. I won't accept it. It's not normal. It's abnormal. It's wrong. It's damaging. It's bad for us. We can't smile at each other. We can't scowl at each other. I can't read lips and I can't hear worth a crap. So if I'm in a crowded bar, it really messes with me. People who are fully deaf have a much bigger problem with it. Yes, Gene, I admit it. I need a hearing aid. I'm still not getting one yet. These masks are not a minor imposition. And not to mention, let's have an update. Hey, the unions, the teachers, and of course, raging Rachel Notley went wild when we unmasked our kids weeks ago. How did that all work out? Did we have mass infections or teachers stacked up dead like cordwood? No, it's fine. Infection numbers are going down. There was never evidence that mass spreading was happening in schools in the first place. And unmasking the kids didn't start any massive infections. Now, from what I've heard, there's still a lot of kids masked up. They're scared. They've had it trained into them. Or they've got teachers who are going to shame kids and force them to wear masks anyways. But the legislation's gone. And over time, kids are going to get rid of those things because they don't want to have them on their bloody faces. They will adjust. But I mean, they shouldn't have had to in the first place. And it's just sickening. So I'm really looking forward in Alberta. And I know we got people viewing from across the country here. They're not getting theirs off soon. But when other provinces start, it puts pressure on. Just keep the pressure on your local governments. Let's hope this whole country gets somewhere close back to normal pretty soon. Cheryl Dawn saying, yeah, Edmonton's keeping the masks. I know. I was kind of surprised with Calgary City Council, considering how dominated they are by the loopy left. Gondek makes no secrets of the control she wants, but maybe once she lost Stephen Carter beaking in her ear, she regained a little bit of reason because they strongly just said, no, we're not going to keep the mask bylaw. As soon as the province is done with it, we're done with it too. Hopefully Edmonton finds out that reality. Edmonton has satellite cities as well. Edmonton has shopping centers outside of it. And there are people like me who I'll go out of my way to shop outside there. I remember before when Calgary was maintaining a mask mandate and the rest of the province didn't, it was kind of a municipality by municipality. I was going shopping to Canadian Tire and Cochrane and places like that because I did not want to wear that bloody mask. I will go that far out of my way. And it's unfortunate. It's punitive to Calgary businesses, especially ones near the periphery of the city, or I should say Edmonton. Calgary's not doing that. But their consumers will move out and those business owners are going to be punished because of a stubborn mayor. Look, if you're scared and you want to wear a mask, wear a bloody mask. This isn't complicated. Welcome to freedom. Just do it. I don't care. You can mask up. You can hide in your basement. If you're terrified of the bug, go home. I'm not. I want to come out. I'm done. It's time. There we go. So Mel's story there. Vax policy lifted Tuesday for Alberta public service workers. A lot of the damage, I think that's part of why they get a little slow and scared on reopening too. I know there's going to be lawsuits. There's so many lawsuits. So many people have been fired because they didn't get vaccinated. And they're still out of work or they've moved on to different work. It's caused them a lot of stress fiscally, personally. They're going to be coming back on the government, on the companies they worked for. Watching CNRL, boy, they're a special sort of place with their back and forth, on again, off again. Sounds like they're trying to find ways maybe to try and get their staff back because they realize firing them all for not getting vaccinated is actually kind of hurting them. But that's their problem. They're a private business. But there's going to be a lot of repercussions. First step, so to get rid of the bloody restrictions, and we're getting really close. And I'm looking forward to it. I'll come up a little more on this stuff going on with Ukraine. It's been interesting, in a very dark way to watch what's developing over there. As I said, there's resistance coming from a number of ways. And there was a mechanic of a yacht, apparently, this was reported on, owned by a Russian tycoon, who made his fortune supplying the Russian military. Well, this mechanic, he was a Ukrainian one, sabotaged and sank the yacht. He said, my boss is a criminal. I don't regret anything, and I'd do it again, and turned himself in. That's what civil disobedience is about. I'm not saying people should go out there and start sinking yachts around Canada, but we're seeing some interesting acts of bravery on the parts of individuals pushing back, on the ground. These Ukrainians are strong, proud people. If there's any part of the country, Alberta, people get to Edmonton and rural areas. We've got a lot of people of Ukrainian descent out here, and they're fantastic people, and they're horrified on seeing what's happening over there. Miss Ukraine, there's pictures have been going around of her. She's a beauty pageant winner. And now she has taken up her firearm and is standing up for the country. Some of these are, photos just to try and gird up support and get people, proud and making those sacrifices and trying to stand up for their country. But I'm sure it's real. If you want to look it up too, look at the women of Israel when they have their conscripted service there with the IDF, and they're walking around with their Uzis and such around the crowds, and they've military training because that country, of course, can't afford to let their guard down, or there's some people who always want to annihilate it. But Israel is an interesting example of a small country that, even though surrounded by a lot of hostile countries, has still managed to, it's a whole separate debate that people can have about Palestine and so on, but they aren't going anywhere. And despite the best efforts of Egypt and Syria and many other nations over the years, a small nation that's determined and entrenched can stand up to itself against what appears to be some very overwhelming forces sometimes. So we'll see what develops in Ukraine. Again, I honestly, I mean, as we were talking with Dave, even with me and my chickens, I said I don't like people, but I don't want to see them shot or tortured or hurt or blown up. And the sooner this can be somewhat peacefully resolved, the better. I don't want to see any more of it. It's an awful circumstance. But we're going to keep tracking it. We're going to keep reporting on it. So remember to, again, I'm going to make that last plug before I take off today, go to the Western Standard, take out that subscription if you haven't already. Nag your friends to take out a subscription. Be an evangelist, come on, help enlighten them. And it helps us. And hey, they'll get that price break. If they put in the code TRIGGERED, they will get the free trial plus $10 off. And they are going to find it worth it. Best $10 a month you can spend. Cheaper than the old newspaper subscriptions. You don't have all that piled up paper to get rid of. Not too many people have fireplaces anymore where you can burn it all off or anything else. I'm going to talk tomorrow. I've got a guest, Landon King, and I think he's from Colliers. And he's going to talk, though, about the commercial vacancy disaster in downtown Calgary. Like we still, it's over 30% vacant in downtown Calgary right now. We're downtown. It's amazing. I've rarely ever had to share an elevator, even though I'm in a 19-story building. Technically, it's 30-some% vacant. I suspect it's a lot bigger. It's just that a lot of companies have longer-term leases going on, so they just can't get out of it. But they're empty offices all sitting there. We need to address it. We got to figure out what it's about. And Landon will be able to give some more solid numbers and answers on that sort of thing. And something else has been kind of under the radar a bit, but the Maverick Party is holding a leadership race. I believe they've only got one registered candidate so far, but there's still some time yet going on. I think it's coming up in May. I will confirm that tomorrow. And so I'll be talking to that candidate. His name's Colin Krieger. He ran for them up in Valley View, which is northern Alberta. We got the Conservative leadership race going on. It seems to be only one official candidate in so far and a whole bunch of tire kickers around. And then we've got the alternative with the Maverick Party going on. So we'll see if what they're building up, because, a regional party, it can make a mark. It certainly did. I mean, I cut my teeth with the Reform Party initially, and the Reform had a lot of influence on federal policy in Canada for a decade. So it can build and it can turn into something, but they haven't really been able to find their feet and figure out exactly how to do it yet. Maybe a new leader will be able to. I mean, Jay Hill, who's been the interim leader, has, of course, loads and loads of parliamentary experience and party organizing. He was an old reformer from the past, but he's done what he can with it so far, and it's time to hand it off to some fresh faces. So we'll check in with Mr. Krieger about that. And of course, there'll be news check-ins throughout the day, and there will be a new rant from me on something. If you got things you want me to rant about or guests you want me to talk to, send me an email, cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com, and I'll consider it. I won't interview every person you send me a name for, but I'm always looking for interesting people to talk to on these issues. And you can send me your thumbs up or thumbs down or tell me where to go or whatnot. That's the way to do it. So I think that's enough for today. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thanks for joining. And I'll see you at 11:30 tomorrow morning.